have burn scars on both forearms that I have stopped explaining to people. The worst one, a 6-inch ridge on my left forearm from a sauté pan I couldn't put down fast enough on a Friday rush in 2017, I used to cover with long sleeves on dates. Now I let it sit in the sun when I'm eating outside. It's mine. I earned it. If someone finds it ugly, they're free to look somewhere else. That's what 11 years in professional kitchens will do to you. You stop apologizing for what the work left on you. You'd think that armor would have carried over into the rest of my life. You'd think a woman who has been on her feet for 14-hour doubles, who smells like hickory smoke on her days off and doesn't care, who has cracked her own 401k with a straight face and paid the early withdrawal penalty like it was a parking ticket. You'd think that woman would have recognized what was happening a little sooner. I didn't. That's the part that still burns worse than the scar. My brother Chris is 31 years old and has the particular gift of men who have never had to land hard. He falls and something soft is always underneath him. For most of his life, that something soft was me. I am not saying this with bitterness, though I understand it sounds like I should be. I'm saying it the way you describe the weather, as a fact of how things were arranged. Our mother died when Chris was 22 and I was 25. She was sick for a long time before the end, and in the last week, when she was in the kind of pain that makes language difficult, she found language anyway. Take care of your brother. I held her hand and told her I would, because that was the only answer there was to give a dying woman who loved her children. I kept that promise like it was the only thing keeping her anchored. Chris met Brianna Sampson at a corporate wellness retreat in Gatlinburg, her words, not mine. She was there as a content strategist, which as far as I could ever determine meant she photographed her meals and captioned them with things like abundance mindset and protect your peace. She had 6,000 followers, a credit score of 560, and the absolute iron certainty that she deserved better than what she currently had. I will give her this. She never hid that about herself. It was just that in her mind, better was a number with a lot of zeros, and the question of who was going to supply those zeros was apparently always somebody else's problem to solve. She called my apartment, very vintage sad girl, the first time she came over. She said it like she was complimenting me, the way people say that's so quirky when they mean that's unfortunate. My apartment was clean. My apartment had good light in the morning. My apartment had a cast iron skillet on the stove that had been seasoned so many times it was basically a family heirloom of my own making. I didn't say any of that. I poured her a glass of wine and reminded myself that she made Chris happy. That was the first thing I paid for with no receipt. They got engaged in March. By April, Brianna had designed the house, a $750,000 custom built on a wooded lot outside Franklin, vaulted ceilings, a content studio with northern light, a pool that looked correct on Instagram. The bank looked at Brianna's 560 and said no. So Brianna said yes to Chris, and Chris said please to me, and I who had promised a dying woman, said yes. $75,000. Down payment, closing costs. 11 years of double shifts dissolved into a wire transfer. I signed as guarantor. I covered the overages when they came in, the quartz countertops, the custom cabinetry, the smart glass that tints on command because Brianna wanted her mornings to feel cinematic. She texted me the invoices at midnight like they were friendly updates. Just a small thing, Lara. You're the best. I paid and I said nothing. I told myself it was love. I told myself this was what family did. I was financing my own erasure, and I kept telling myself it was generosity. The walkthrough was on a Thursday in August. I drove the Civic out to Franklin at 9 in the morning, the Tennessee heat already doing what it does, the kind that sits on you. The house was still raw. Sawdust on everything, exposed framing on the east wing, concrete dust hanging in the air. It smelled like new construction and money I no longer had. Brianna was already filming when I got there. She was walking through the unfinished kitchen, narrating for her phone about the journey and manifesting your dream space. Chris was behind her carrying her bag because she had both hands occupied. I walked the rooms alone. I looked at the cabinetry I'd paid for, the counters I'd paid for, the smart glass that would tint on command in a house I would never spend the night in. I did the math in my head the way I always do when I'm nervous, service math, Missy and place math, the kind of arithmetic that keeps your hands busy. I was almost calm by the time we moved to the back patio. Brianna lowered her phone. That should have been the signal in retrospect. Brianna did not lower her phone. She told me she'd added an infinity pool to the build. I heard the words, and I did not move. I stood in the concrete dust on that unfinished porch, and I let the sentence rearrange itself in my head. $50,000. Just roll it in, she said. You have savings. And I said no. I'm not sure I've ever said that word out loud to her before. I have said, let me see what I can do, and I'll figure it out, and of course, whatever you need. But I had not said no. Not once in 18 months of midnight invoices and wire transfers and the gut feeling I kept sitting on because our mother said take care of your brother. I said no. I said I was done. I said we were 48 hours from closing on a house I'd already hollowed myself out to fund, and I was not adding a single dollar more. Brianna stepped close to me. She's small, Brianna. She works out, she posts about it. She has the kind of thinness that reads as discipline on a phone screen. Standing close like that, she looked almost delicate. What came out of her mouth was not delicate. She called me pathetic. She said the word like she'd been saving it. She said I was barren and invisible. She used that word specifically, barren, aimed right at the place she'd calculated would land hardest. She said that funding this house was the only useful thing I would ever do with my life. That without it, I was just a line cook with ugly hands and no one who needed her. I don't remember deciding not to respond. I think my body was still parsing the words, still running them through whatever system you use to confirm that yes, a person actually said that when she shoved me. Both hands, center of my chest, hard. The porch had no railing on the back edge, unfinished, like I said. I went off it before I could get my arms up. I hit the pile of construction debris on the way down, rebar on the left shoulder. The impact separating the joint on contact. My head hit the packed dirt and something concrete. I lay there on my back in the August heat looking up at a sky the color of bleached denim. I could hear Brianna above me. She was talking to Chris. She was saying she slipped, baby. I don't know, she just slipped. I turned my head, I shouldn't have, but I did, and I could see Chris at the edge of the porch. He was looking down at me. At his sister lying in the dirt with blood coming from somewhere above her eyebrow and her shoulder pointing in a direction shoulders are not designed to point. He looked at me for what felt like a long time. Then he turned around. I heard his footsteps across the porch. I heard a car door. I heard them drive away. The construction foreman, Brian Johnson, Brain. Everyone calls him Brain, a nickname he got in high school and has made his peace with. Heard the noise from the east wing where he'd been checking framing. He found me in the debris pile and called 911 without asking me any questions I didn't have answers to yet. He rode with me to the ER. I did not ask him to. He just did not do it, which at that point was the most love I'd felt in 18 months. Grade 3 concussion, AC joint separation. The shoulder required a sling, a referral to an orthopedic surgeon, and 6 weeks of not lifting anything, which for a sous chef is functionally the same as 6 weeks of not existing professionally. The ER attending documented everything. The concussion protocol was 8 to 12 weeks before full return to activity. The income picture was simple. I was not going to have any. From the hospital bed, with my arm in a sling and a bandage above my eyebrow, I opened my email. The title company had us all on a chain loan officer, listing agent, buyer's agent, underwriter, the closing attorneys. Everybody who needed to be there 48 hours out. I hit reply all. I attached my discharge papers. I wrote 2 sentences. I have sustained a grade 3 concussion and a separated shoulder in an incident at the property earlier today. This constitutes a material adverse change. I cannot sign. Then I texted Chris, 1 word. Done. He replied 3 hours later. The text said, Lara, please don't do this. Stay away from us. I turned my phone face down and asked Brain if he'd go get me a coffee from the vending machine. He said yes. He brought back 2, because he figured correctly that nobody wanted to drink hospital vending machine coffee alone. Here's something about Brianna Sampson that I will give her full credit for. She was not, at her core, a woman who gave up. She had waived the financing contingency the day before closing. Her agent had suggested it to make the offer more competitive, and Brianna had agreed because Brianna operated on vibes and momentum and had not read the contract closely enough to understand what she was agreeing to. Waiving the financing contingency meant that if the deal collapsed for financial reasons, the seller kept the earnest money. The earnest money was $40,000. Brianna had $40,000 in a savings account that I did not know about. When my reply all hit the chain and the loan officer called to confirm that I was withdrawing as guarantor, which I was, medically and legally and in every other way, the deal should have died quietly. The seller would have kept the earnest money per the contract, and Brianna and Chris would have lost $40,000, which was painful but survivable. But Brianna, from wherever she was sitting when she got that news, decided she could save it. She wired her $40,000 directly to escrow. She thought she could bridge the gap, force the close, and deal with me later from inside the house I'd helped her build. The loan had already collapsed. The underwriter had pulled the file 2 hours after my email. There was nothing to bridge. The seller's attorney sent a very polite, very thorough letter explaining that per the terms Brianna had signed, the $40,000 was retained as liquidated damages. Brianna had tried to trap me, and she'd handed $40,000 to a stranger in Franklin, Tennessee. They had also given notice on their apartment, so they were at the Motel 6 off Murfreesboro Road when Brianna went live. I watched it from my couch with my arm in a sling and Pearl next to me, and I will tell you that Brianna in crisis is almost impressive. She had the lighting right. She had the angle right. She was crying in the specific way that reads as devastated but composed on a phone screen. She told her 6,000 followers that I had attacked her, that I'd known she was pregnant, that I had tried to hurt her baby. Pearl looked at me. I said, "There's a camera." Brian's crew had mounted a motion sensor lumber cam on the utility pole at the edge of the property. Standard job site security, cloud stored, high definition, audio enabled. The angle covered the entire back patio and the debris field below it. Brian had mentioned it to me in the ambulance, the way a person mentions something important without being sure yet why it's important. I texted Detective Lopez with the case number I'd gotten when the ER social worker helped me file the report. I said I had footage. Brian sent the cloud link within the hour. Brianna was arrested in the Motel 6 parking lot the following morning. According to someone who told someone who eventually told Pearl, she was on the phone with a brand contact when the officers arrived. She was explaining that she was in the middle of a moment and could they come back in 20 minutes. Chris was in the doorway of room 107 with a bag of Whataburger. He did not move. Williamson County Courthouse in the fall has a particular quality of light, the kind that comes through institutional windows and makes everything look like documentation. I sat in courtroom 3B in November, and I watched Brianna Sampson plead guilty to aggravated assault and filing a false police report. 18 months county correctional, 3 years probation, $11,800 restitution. Her car had already been repossessed by then. Her following had dropped from 6,000 to somewhere under 400. The algorithm, it turns out, does not favor a hiatus that begins with an arrest in a motel parking lot. Her net worth, last I heard from the people who track these things, was meaningfully negative. My $75,000 was back. Every cent of it, plus the restitution, plus the $40,000 she'd effectively handed to the seller trying to outmaneuver me. The scar above my eyebrow was still pink and raised. The shoulder aches when the weather drops now, the same way my kitchen joints do, the same geography of consequence. I didn't cry in the courtroom. I didn't feel what I expected to feel, which I suppose I'd imagined would be some large, clean thing, relief, or vindication, or the satisfaction of a closed account. What I felt was smaller and quieter than that. What I felt was like putting down something heavy you've been carrying so long you stopped noticing the weight. and just for a moment, feeling the absence of it in your hands. I drove home on I-65 with the windows down. The October air in Nashville does this thing where it smells like wood smoke and something sweet underneath. And for the first time in a long time, I could smell it without it getting tangled up in everything else. Chris's letter came on a Saturday. I recognized his handwriting on the envelope. He writes his capital L's the same way our mother did, with a little curl at the bottom that I used to find reassuring. I stood at my mailbox for a moment. I thought about what was inside. I have a particular talent for knowing the shape of things before they're opened. It's a kitchen skill, in a way, understanding the structure of what you're working with before you get into it. 3 pages of apology, 2 of excuse, 1 ask. 6 pages total, which was actually more than I'd given him credit for. I put it in the recycling bin on my way back upstairs. Not out of anger, exactly. I want to be precise about that. I've spent a lot of time in my life being angry at Chris and calling it something else, and I've spent a lot of time doing things for Chris and calling it something else, and I'm tired of not calling things what they are. I put the letter in the recycling bin because there was nothing in that envelope that was going to rearrange the facts. He stood at the edge of that porch. He looked at me. He got in the car. That is a thing that happened. Language doesn't undo it. That night my apartment was full. Brain was crouched under my kitchen sink fixing a faucet that had been dripping for 3 months. And he was telling a joke so bad that Pearl had put down the knife she was using to chop tomatoes, just so she could give the moment her full horrified attention. There was a bottle of wine on the counter that someone had brought, and no one had tracked whose it was. There was music, something with horns, coming from the little Bluetooth speaker Pearl had given me when I got out of the hospital, because she said I needed something that wasn't television. None of these people share my last name. Nobody in that apartment that night was there because of blood or obligation or a promise made in a hospital room where dying was happening. They were there because they wanted to be. They came when I was in the debris pile and they stayed after. Brain pulled the footage before I even thought to ask him. Pearl brought groceries for 3 weeks straight and never once suggested I owed her anything for it. That's it. That's the whole accounting. There was no contract. I understand now that this is the distinction I spent 11 years not making. Between the people who are in your life because they need something from you and the people who are in your life because they choose you. The first kind will always need more than you have. The second kind bring wine on a Saturday and fix your faucet badly and don't keep score. The scar above my eyebrow has settled into something permanent. The shoulder will ache when the weather drops for the rest of my life. My 401k is recovering, slowly, the way injuries do, not all the way back to what it was, but functional, mine, accruing again. I have a savings account with my name on it, and no one else's signature anywhere near it. I have a kitchen full of people who showed up and kept showing up. And for the first time in 11 years, when the shift ends and I drive home with the windows down and the October air coming in, I don't owe anyone anything at all. The faucet still drips a little. Brain says he'll come back for it. I told him to take his time.